Welcome to section 7.2 of genetics. In this section, we will be memorizing the details of Rett syndrome. Let's get started. This story takes place on a street between a retro diner and a mechanic shop. The retro diner should help you remember that this is Rett syndrome. Now, all of the chaos started when this taxi driver reversed out of the mechanic shop in a great hurry. You can even see the reverse track marks all over the road. This reversing will help you remember that in Rett syndrome, patients experience a regression of abilities. We will get into the ways in which Rett syndrome patients regress in a moment. Just know that these patients develop appropriately for a while and then regress and develop issues. In his careless exit, this driver knocked over 2 streetlights, causing them to fall in this X position. This X that is formed by the lights will help you remember that Rett syndrome is X-linked. Also notice that one of the lights smashed down onto this table back here. This nice couple was playing dominoes outside this cafe. You can see dominoes falling everywhere. This is to help remind you that this is X-linked dominant. Now notice these little girls running away from the falling streetlight. Thankfully, they made it out of the way in time. But notice that they are girls. This is to remind you that only females are impacted by Rett syndrome. This is because Rett syndrome is X-linked dominant. Boys only have one X chromosome, so an altered X chromosome is devastating, causing them to die in utero or shortly after birth. As you may know, most food establishments have a happy hour in the early afternoon when things are slow. During their happy hour, restaurants will give out cheap drinks or other items at very cheap prices. Now, this retro diner is no exception. On the window, you will see happy hour runs from 1 to 4. This happy hour time frame will help you remember that symptoms begin between ages 1 to 4. Remember that this is regression, so they will develop normally until the disease starts to manifest itself, at which point regression begins. This light post smashed a poor little drive-through clown. Look how squashed he is. Man, it's really fortunate that those girls got out of the way. This is to help you remember that Rett syndrome causes growth failure. Now, this clown is normally how the drive-thru customers place their order. Once the clown got all smashed up, the voice box got destroyed. You can see the garbled sounds coming out of it. This clown's garbled speech will help you remember verbal regression in Rett syndrome. Do you remember how it was a taxi that caused all of this chaos? Silly taxi driver. Remembering this taxi will help you recall that Rett syndrome patients have ataxia. So taxi, ataxia. Now, the careless driver knocked over a big motor in the mechanic shop, causing it to crash to the ground. This motor will help you remember motor regression in Rett syndrome. So their ability to move appropriately is impacted. That makes sense. They have ataxia, like we just discussed. Notice how the motor is still spinning and rattling around. It's kind of like it's having a seizure. This seizing motor will help you remember that these patients are prone to seizures. The mechanics in this shop are super busy. So busy, in fact, that they don't have time to go to the bathroom. So they just pee in this gross bucket labeled mechanic pee. This nasty mechanic pee bucket will help you remember that in Rett syndrome, the affected gene is MECP2. Mechanics P2, after all. So mechanic P, MECP2 gene. This mechanic, hard at work, is trying to wash off all the oil from his hands. Oil is really hard to get off, so he's really wringing his hands. This hand wringing will help you remember the stereotyped hand wringing seen in Rett syndrome patients. And with stereotyped hand wringing, we have completed our story on Rett syndrome.